Well, hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we are taking a look at the Season 4 Affix. It's called Shrouded. There's a Dreadlord and there's a buff and stuff, but before we start on that, I do want to show you something pretty cool. A lot of people were saying like, yo, I don't know what Warlords of Draenor is. How do I do Iron Docks? Well, of course, this is 2022 Blizzard, so we have a solution to that. If you talk to this guy who lowers your key as well, he now also has some dialogues. Where can I find the Iron Docks and the Grimrail Depot? You can find a portal to this Gorgrond upstairs in the Ring of Transference. Does that mean there's not going to be any portals? I don't really know the answer to that because they're pretty much porting you right to the dungeon. There's just these 3 portals right next to the flight path. Now, possible it's only for the PTR, but it does seem like if they added the dialogue to the NPC, it's probably not, because there is actual NPCs on the PTR that allow you to port there anyway, so it seems kind of weird. Takes you to the deactivated Ogre Waystone, which I can't even remember what this is for, to be honest, but it was some kind of teleportation system or something for what, I don't even remember. It's in Gorgrond, and both of them are in Gorgrond, which is kind of funny. I don't know. Almost seems like maybe that voting was a little fixed. What were they going to do if they weren't? But yeah, you can come here to Grimrail Depot and test out this dungeon. But let's get a start on the actual seasonal affix, because it's pretty interesting, and I'll give my full thoughts on that. It says, Shrouded, Nathrazim infiltrators have disguised themselves among enemies throughout the dungeon. Cartel Ta will reward you handsomely for assisting in their captures. Let's find out if that's true. Right out of the gate, there's a guy with the title Bounty Hunter, so he's like that dog guy. I can offer you benefits for each Dreadlord you help me capture. What do you say, friend? What are we playing, Pokemon? Well, you can choose which stat you get. Every time you kill one of these Dreadlords, you get a buff, and I guess it's based on whatever stat you want, so probably somebody's gonna make a weak aura for this to automate it, because honestly, you don't really have a lot of time to get it going. It's just gotta be done within that 10-second start of the countdown, and so I picked versatility, a mutually beneficial arrangement. I look forward to our shared success, but he's not going to do anything. But yeah, right now we already have a 2% versatility buff, which is interesting. So as you have a look around the dungeon, you'll see characters with this kind of purple glow. No, they're not shadow priests. They're actually mobs that are going to turn into Dreadlords. And as you see, as soon as we pull them, they do indeed turn into Dreadlords. They have 250k health on this level, which is slightly more than the trash they're in, but in general, they seem like they're meant to be comparable to the actual trash you fight. They're going to be a lot easier to kill than looks like anything we've ever fought as a seasonal affix in Shadowlands especially. They do some mechanics, but not a lot, and as soon as you kill them, Cartel Fella is going to show up and he's going to capture one with the Pokeball. Now, what's really interesting is you also get a buff for helping him kill it on top of what he agreed to assist you with. But right now we have a 4% versatility buff, but that's not the only thing we got. In terms of mechanic though, he does something similar to an ability we see in Theater of Pain. Does a little sleep cloud that if you stand in it, you experience a terrifying dream. That's one way I could describe doing Grimrail Depot again, terrifying dream. And then he's also going to do a frontal as well. Vampire Claws just basically heals him for as much damage as it does to you, so as a tank you're going to have to potentially stop that. And there's Carrion Swarm, which is just right now a healing reduction if you get hit by it, and some AoE damage. Mob is not stunnable, and it looks like it can't be gripped either, so it seems like there's probably no way to actually stop any of these mechanics. As you see, it does heal him a sizable chunk even on this difficulty. I'd imagine the higher you go, the more damage that's going to be, and the harder that's going to get to prevent him from healing with. You'll see when you kill him, you get a buff from this guy here, restoring 6% health and mana every 1 second. So yeah, there is still a nice little mana thing. I will say that one of the best things about Season 3 was the heal and the mana restoration as well. It really solves a lot of problems. If you activate it in the middle of a difficult pack, it really opens the door for success. And I'm really glad to see that that same type of buff is coming along with us into Season 4. But it's important to realize that this affix actually removes mobs from the dungeon. So my immediate question is, what mobs are going to be chosen, and will that change weekly? See, there is a lot of them in the dungeon. I'm in range of 3 just right now. So the question will be if we lose count from these mobs or not, and how will this actually affect routes? Of course, these dungeons don't really have that many established routes, especially the Legion and the WoD ones. But of course, Junkyard, I remember the route very sincerely, and I expect to be able to duplicate it. But as you see here, you actually do not get count from pulling and killing that that mob. Whether or not that's intended, I don't know, but it probably is because of course you get a permanent buff. So the question's going to be, a mob like that on its own down here, is it worth getting that? For a permanent buff? Yeah, probably. For a mob like this guy's supposed to give 18% enemy forces, and he's just going to turn into a vampire, give us nothing. So that's really going to impact routes. I have to say that this is probably going to end up having a pretty big detrimental effect on certain routes as well, and it's going to be incumbent upon you as the tank to learn a lot more about what routes can offer you and what ones are going to be most effective. I also did want to point out that just now I used AMS to prevent the vampiric claws. So I told you, Blood DK is the strongest tank. But the Dreadlords aren't the only thing that's going to be a part of this affix. We also have a mini boss called Zolgamux. Does a few things, but probably one of the most interesting one is it summons an ad that makes you hostile to your allies. This ad's actually killable, so if you just kill it, it will stop the cast, but it can't actually be stunned or anything else will stop it. Main thing she's going to do also is this blood siphon mechanic. It's basically going to be just like the Hakara shield's going to take health from you and you have to break through it to be able to continue it, and we want to interrupt her after we do. Has a few other mechanics. This shadow eruption deals damage and makes you take a lot less healing, and also has a stackable dot on you. But this is a substantial mini boss. Like, this is a big deal. Fighting this person is a real pain, and again, if they're not going to be giving count, it's really hard to understand what the goals are here with this affix. It does look like if the mob casts hypnosis on you, you will not actually be charmed or whatever if you use AMS yet again. But otherwise, that blood shield siphons blood from your enemies, inflicts 4 shadow damage every half second, and heals for that amount. So you want to quickly break through this and interrupt it if you have that luxury. I'm assuming that we're only ever going to fight this mob once in a dungeon though, and that it'll be in a spot that's very recognizable, but it does seem like it's going to have a dramatic impact on the actual route itself. When you are hypnotized, you absorb damage and keeps the player in a state of hypnosis, suffering 7 shadow damage every 1 second until the hypnosis is broken. So basically you have to break through a shield on your friends as well, just like you might have to break through a shield on this enemy. And when she dies, it looks like you actually get multiple stacks of the buff there. Look like 3 stacks of the buff, and the restoration also seems to be 3 stacks as well, or even more. It looked like 20% of the healing there. So it's pretty interesting. Multiple stacks for fighting that NPC. But let's talk about what my initial thoughts on this affix are, and I'd love to hear yours down below in the comment section. Even just reading about this affix, I immediately have some major concerns. Number 1, is this really going to impact routes? I have to say, I'm really happy that they're doing this affix in Season 4 and not in Shadowlands at all. My god, if this is actually intentionally taking trash away from packs, this would probably be the least fun thing that's ever happened in the middle of an expansion to Mythic Plus. It's all in Blizzard's hands here, but if they're potentially taking away mobs that you're really relying on to get count, it can throw a huge wrench in the works for some dungeons. And an affix like this kind of scares me because it's something that it makes me wonder what the overall power level of it's actually going to be. I think a lot of people are going to just want to go and get as many of these as possible. And from the DPS perspective, it sounds like a good idea. But from the tank's perspective, it's going to dramatically alter the routes and it's going to make them way more complicated. Now, again, how many people actually have routes in their head for these old dungeons? Yeah, probably not that many. So it's a good time to experiment with something like this. Some other things that get brought up as well in my head that aren't necessarily related to this affix, but are going to be a bit of a downer coming off Season 3. One thing about Season 3's affix is that it dramatically improves your ability to do bosses. And Shadowlands affixes have had a lot of variability in how that works. Like Season 2, usually the end of the dungeon would be far easier than the beginning of the dungeon because you can get all of the anima powers and you'd be a lot stronger by the end. Well, this affix has the potential to put that whole thing back in play, where the start of the dungeon is now just significantly more difficult than the end of the dungeon. Will that actually cause any issues for players? I don't really know. I think the dungeons that we have here in Season 4 are going to be mostly agnostic on that front. We don't really have any Mists of Turn Aside situations here where the first boss is just an absolute wall. But that was probably the most noticeable boss when Season 3 came out, because you weren't banking on having a bunch of power going into that fight, having to gather up 3 lieutenants just to be able to take it out. You're having a relatively straightforward affix that can help you with the fight. But most importantly about the Season 3 affix was that it was just it's mostly handled while you're fighting trash. And I will say that's one of the nicest things about the current affix that we have here in season 4. It seems like it's never going to actually complicate any packs. Now, certainly if you get the mini boss, and we'll have to see where that's located in all 8 dungeons, that could cause some problems. But again, this is all in Blizzard's hands. And after I saw what I saw with the placements in both season 2 and season 3, I trust them to make the right decision with this and put them in packs that are intelligent, packs that will be relatively noticeable, and packs that you'll be able to control what you pull when and where. Because obviously if you put that mini boss in the hardest pack possible, yeah, that's kind of unfair. It's so mechanically dense too. It seems like it's a real DPS race to get that mob killed in an efficient way. There's multiple mechanics on that mob that is going to slow you down while fighting that mob, but at least you do get a substantial chunk of the buff afterwards. The big question though, is the amount of secondary stats you're getting actually really going to help you do the dungeon? Because, you know, ironically, we were taking a look at Junkyard, and one of the prevailing strategies for Junkyard was to simply gather all the shock bots as fast as possible. But what happens if a similar strategy ends up breaking down with those Dreadlord mobs as well? It's an interesting concept, because if the dungeon allows for it, why not? Why not just go and do 100% of the trash count and get every single Dreadlord buff you can, and then go blow the doors off all the fights? Well, that's provided that the affix actually provides that level of power, and I'm just not sure it will. But as of right now, it seems pretty uninspired, I have to say. I really am worried about what it's going to do to routes and overall trash percentage. My big concern is that it changes every week. The locations are random. And my bigger concern is that that mini boss is actually random too. It seemed like a really weird place for it in that very little amount of testing I just did right there, especially if the timer's ticking. That thing seems like you can easily add a couple minutes to your run. So I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Obviously, season 4 seems like it's far away. Who knows when it's really coming? The affix is not necessarily that exciting, but the big thing I really like about it is that it's really present. And I really like that about season 3 as well. The first 2 seasons of Shadowlands were a lot more thematically strong, that's for sure. This one really doesn't even make sense. Like, I don't understand what this has to do with Shadowlands, let alone season 4 at all. But I guess it's, you know, continuing this Dreadlord theme thing here. But I like how frequent it is, and we'll see just how powerful it ends up making us. So thanks for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are. We'll continue taking a look at this as it develops. Otherwise, stay tuned for more Mythic Plus content.